Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today we're doing something a little bit different. It's our 1-hour American Advanced English Listening practice, but instead of just passive listening, we're going for a much deeper, more actionable exploration. We are doing a custom deep dive into the foundational science of speaking English confidently. You know, when you see someone who just communicates so fluently, they're articulate, and it seems like it takes no effort at all. Well, it's really easy to think they just have some kind of natural talent, some gift that the rest of us just don't have. But the whole premise of our deep dive today, and this is based on a huge amount of research from cognitive science, from psychology, is that confidence isn't a talent, it's a skill. A measurable, buildable skill that's rooted deep inside your brain's hardware, your psychology, and even your body's chemistry. So our mission today is really for you, for the learner who's felt that frustrating mental freeze, that moment where the words you know are there, you know them perfectly well, but they just disappear under pressure.
We want you to walk away from this conversation understanding exactly why that happens, and more importantly, with concrete, science-backed strategies to turn that hesitation into real, consistent communication. And it all really hinges on this one key idea. Confidence isn't about being perfect. It's about strategic practice that actually works with your brain, not against it.
That framing is so important. I mean, the research we looked at pulls together so many different fields, and it makes one thing incredibly clear. Just relying on grammar books and vocabulary lists, well, that's only going to get you about halfway there. To get to that genuine speaking confidence, you have to look at the whole system. So the path forward really involves understanding your body, how to manage the chemistry of stress, and your mind, how you can change the stories you tell yourself. And of course, your practice, how you can strategically build those neural pathways so that speaking becomes automatic. And what's really, I think, hopeful about all of this is that initial realization. When you see someone just breezing through a conversation, their words just flowing, the ease is not magic. It's not luck. It is the result of well-worn neural pathways. It's automated success that they built through repetition. And that's the core mechanism we're going to break down today, showing you how you can build that exact system for yourself.
Okay, let's unpack that. That scientific foundation, I think we have to start at the very bottom layer, the neurological level. If we want to stop that mental freeze, we first need to understand the physical mechanics. How does the brain even handle language? And how does anxiety just throw a wrench in the works? I mean, think about what it takes just to speak a sentence in English. It is a massive undertaking for your brain. It's coordinating all these different regions at the same time. You've got the classic language centers, right? There's Broca's area, which is usually in your frontal lobe, and that's for speech production, actually forming the sounds, putting the grammar together. Then you have Wernicke's area, deeper in the temporal lobe, and that's all about comprehension, making sure you get what you're hearing and that your own message makes sense.
And that's just the abstract part of it, the thought. It gets even more complex when you bring in the motor cortex. The motor cortex has to coordinate all those tiny, precise physical movements, your tongue, your lips, controlling your breath from your diaphragm. It's all timed perfectly. So neurologically speaking, confidence is when all of those pathways, from understanding to producing the thought to physically saying it, are working together smoothly with almost zero friction.
To visualize this, that hiking trail analogy is really useful, but let's get a bit more specific. When you first learn a new word or, say, a tricky grammar structure, the neural signal is basically hacking its way through a dense, overgrown forest. You're slow, you're not sure of your footing, and every single step takes a huge amount of conscious effort. You're thinking about the verb, the word order, the pronunciation, all at once. It's why speaking as a beginner is so mentally exhausting.
Right. Now, contrast that with the confident speaker. They've walked that same trail, used that same phrase or sentence structure hundreds, maybe thousands of times. The path isn't a trail anymore. It's a brightly lit 6-lane superhighway. The whole process of coming up with and saying the sentence just bypasses all that conscious step-by-step thinking. It's automatic. So the goal of building confidence isn't just about, filling the forest with more words. It's about paving those key routes into superhighways.
That's great distinction. Conscious effort versus automation. But what happens when that 6-lane superhighway suddenly gets shut down by, an emergency roadblock? And that brings us to this mechanism, the amygdala hijack.
It does, yeah. The amygdala is your brain's ancient fear center. Its only job is survival. So when it perceives a threat, which for our modern brains could be a high-stakes meeting or an unexpected question or even just the fear of looking foolish, the amygdala sounds a full-blown alarm. And what's so critical to understand here is the physiological response. When the amygdala freaks out, it doesn't just make you feel nervous, it physically diverts the brain's resources. Blood flow is literally shunted away from your prefrontal cortex.
And that's the sophisticated part of the brain.
That's the CEO of the brain. It's responsible for complex thought, working memory, all the things you need for fluent, complex sentences. And that blood flow gets redirected to the more primitive survival centers, preparing you for fight or flight. This is the biological reality of the mental freeze. You know the word, but the part of your brain that needs to find and say that word is temporarily offline. It's under-resourced.
That explains so much. That frustrating gap between what you know and what you can actually say in the moment. So if the problem's biological, a stress response, how does that story about Maria fit in? The Brazilian software engineer who wrote perfect English but froze in meetings. What was her fix?
Maria's breakthrough was realizing she wasn't having a memory problem. She was having a neurological resource crisis. So the solution she used was simple, but it was so effective because it tackles the biology head-on. She started doing slow, controlled, diaphragmatic breathing, deep belly breaths before and even during those stressful meetings. And the reason this works is fascinating. Slow, rhythmic breathing directly stimulates the vagus nerve. This nerve is a major player in calming down your whole system. By breathing slowly, you're sending a signal to your body that says, you're safe, there's no line here, it's just a meeting. And that signal calms the amygdala down. It prevents the blood from being redirected away from your prefrontal cortex.
So the lights stay on in the language center of the brain.
The lights stay on. And the sources confirm that by just consistently doing these simple breathing techniques, Maria kept her linguistic resources available right where she needed them. She saw a huge rise in her speaking confidence in just a few weeks. It wasn't about studying more English, it was about managing her internal chemistry.
That is such a powerful idea, that confidence can start with just breathing.
Yep.
But the brain also has this other critical component, a sort of customizable internal filter. We need to talk about that because it affects what information your brain even pays attention to. The reticular activating system, or RAS. So basically, your senses are just being bombarded with billions of bits of data every single second. Your brain can't possibly process all of it consciously. The RAS is like a sophisticated bouncer at the door of your conscious mind. It's this gatekeeper that's constantly scanning everything and deciding what's important enough to let in. You can think of it like a personalized Google search that's running 24/7 in your head, and you are the one typing in the keywords.
And this is where it gets really interesting for a learner. Because the RAS is highly programmable. It learns what to look for based on what you consistently focus on. So imagine you've programmed your internal Google to search for English mistakes. If your dominant thought is, I'm so bad at speaking English, your RAS gets to work filtering your reality to find evidence that proves you right. And what's the result of that? Well, you will consciously notice every single awkward pause you make, every grammatical slip, every time a listener looks even slightly confused. Those moments get magnified, they get reinforced, and they're prioritized in your memory. It creates this feedback loop that just confirms your negative belief. You start to perceive your speaking experience as just a series of failures.
So if that's the case, the opposite must also be true. If you can consciously shift your focus to something like, I am improving every single day, then the RAS has to filter reality differently, doesn't it?
It has to, yes. If you program your filter for English progress, the RAS starts highlighting the evidence of your success, things you might have otherwise just ignored. You start to actually notice the jokes that land, the time you explained a complex idea and everyone understood, the conversations that just flowed. And this isn't just, positive thinking fluff. This is real, observable, cognitive neuroscience. It directly shapes how you perceive and remember your own experiences. Confident speakers, whether they know it or not, have trained their RAS to focus on their successes and on the learning moments. They focus on the forward momentum, not just the mistakes. So they literally perceive the exact same speaking journey as productive and successful, while the anxious speaker perceives it as being full of failure. Training your RAS makes all the difference.
That is the perfect way to transition into our next section, because it takes us out of the brain's fixed hardware and into the much more layered world of psychology. The reasons why we choose to speak or to freeze. If our RAS is filtering for failure, how do we consciously rewrite that script? What's the real fear that's holding us back? Well, the research suggests that the fear we feel when we speak a new language, it taps into some of our deepest, most primal human anxieties. It's not really about grammar. is the fear of being judged, the fear of looking unintelligent, and probably the most powerful one, the fear of social rejection. We're fundamentally social creatures, and speaking poorly in an important situation can feel like a direct threat to our belonging in the group.
And here's the really counterintuitive part. This fear often has almost no connection to your actual English ability. We all know people who are advanced speakers, they can ace any test, but they just seize up in a real conversation because that fear mechanism is so strong. And on the flip side, you see beginners with a tiny vocabulary who just speak so boldly and they make real connections. The difference isn't their skill level, it's their psychological relationship with making a mistake. Which brings us right to Carol Dweck's foundational research on mindset. This gives us such a critical framework for understanding this. We have to clearly separate a fixed mindset from a growth mindset. A fixed mindset sees ability as fixed. It's a static trait. It's an identity statement. You either have it or you don't. The little voice in your head says, I'm just not good at languages. This is who I am. And that makes any mistake feel devastating because it feels like proof of that inadequacy. So it encourages you to protect yourself by just being silent. If you don't speak, you can't fail. Your identity is safe.
And the growth mindset just flips that completely on its head.
Right.
It sees ability as something that can be developed through effort, through strategy, through learning. How does that change the internal story?
The internal story changes from a judgment to a possibility. It becomes, I'm not fluent yet, but with every practice session, with every mistake, I'm getting better. This reframe is the psychological key. For someone with a growth mindset, a mistake is stripped of its shame. It's not proof you're inadequate. It's just essential, high-value data. It's your brain telling you, aha, this is exactly what we need to work on next.
Take the case of Ahmed, the accountant. He had spent years passively consuming English reading, listening to podcasts, watching movies. He had a great foundation, but he almost never spoke. His deep-seated belief, his fixed mindset was a very simple rule. If I can't speak perfectly, I shouldn't speak at all.
So perfectionism was his shield. It was his shield, and it was preventing his actual ability from ever coming out. But once he was able to reframe mistakes as just non-judgmental data points, he started to speak. And the documentation showed that within 6 months, he went from being silent in meetings to confidently leading complex presentations. The skill was already there, he just had to pick the psychological lock.
That's reframing mistakes.
Yeah.
But speaking a language like English, which is so global, it can cut even deeper. To a layer of identity, it's not just about, do I make a mistake, but who do I become if I speak this language fluently? And that brings us to social identity theory.
That's absolutely right. Social identity theory basically says that a huge part of our self-worth comes from the groups we feel we belong to, our in-groups. For a lot of language learners, becoming really fluent in English can trigger this big internal conflict. They might unconsciously associate speaking confident English with belonging to a Western out group. And they fear that to do that, they have to betray or lose their original cultural identity.
So they feel like an imposter.
Exactly, like they're pretending to be someone they're not. Yeah. And that's a massive, often invisible barrier to confidence. It makes you hold back your true voice.
So if the core conflict is this fear of losing your identity, what's the solution the research offers?
The solution is to embrace what's called an additive identity. The goal is never to subtract or abandon any part of your native culture or who you are. The goal is to expand. To become a multilingual, multicultural version of yourself, you add English competence to your existing identity. It's about being a global communicator who is also proudly from your home culture, not some imitation of a native speaker. This was the big breakthrough for Priya, the teacher from India. She was holding back because she felt that adopting a certain kind of fluency or a Western accent would be a betrayal of her Indian identity. Her confidence was just paralyzed by this loyalty conflict. But then she had this realization that she could speak clear, confident English while fully keeping her Indian accent, using her cultural expressions, and just owning her unique style. She realized English belonged to her, not the other way around. And that reframing just eliminated all that internal resistance and unleashed her real, confident voice.
Okay, so we've managed the brain's chemistry and we've navigated the psychological hurdles. Let's get tactical now. What are the strategic actions we can take to change the actual behavior of speaking? How do we systematically make our brain more comfortable with using English under pressure?
The first and maybe most practical tool is the comfort zone expansion model. To build confidence, you have to intentionally put yourself in situations that challenge you, but not so much that they trigger that amygdala hijack we talked about. You can picture it as 3 circles. In the middle, you have your comfort zone. These are the easy things, like ordering coffee with a phrase you've memorized. It's safe. The next circle out is the learning zone. These are things that are challenging, they take some effort, but they're doable. Maybe having a short, spontaneous chat with the barista about the weather. And the outer circle is the panic zone. This is where the challenge is so overwhelming, like being asked to give an impromptu speech, that it just shuts you down. You don't learn anything there, you just reinforce your anxiety.
So all the growth, all the magic happens in that middle band, the learning zone. How do you know you're there and not accidentally stepping into the panic zone?
That is the key question. The learning zone feels like effort without paralysis. You should finish the interaction feeling a bit tired, but also successful. Even if you made mistakes, you feel like you accomplished something. If you finish feeling overwhelmed and ashamed and vowing never to try that again, you probably hit the panic zone. So confidence grows by constantly, systematically pushing the edge of your comfort zone just a little bit further into that manageable learning territory. Lynn, the graduate student in the sources, did this perfectly. She didn't try to go from silent to conference speaker overnight. Her plan was structured. Week 1, just answer one simple question in a seminar. Week 4, schedule a short, low-stakes chat with a professor. By week 12, she volunteered to present her research, but to a very small, friendly group. Each step was a small stretch which built her confidence without ever overwhelming her.
That's about active practice. But we can also learn just by watching. Which brings us to this really profound idea of the mirror neuron effect.
Yes, this is such a powerful tool that people rarely use intentionally. Mirror neurons are these special brain cells that fire both when we do an action and when we watch someone else do the same action. They're the biological basis for things like empathy and learning by imitation. And the implication for building your confidence is huge. When you watch a truly confident English speaker, someone giving a great speech, or just having a relaxed conversation, your mirror neurons are firing along with them. Your brain is essentially mentally rehearsing their confident behavior. You're practicing their poise, their rhythm, their body language without even saying a word. This high-quality input is vital for training your own brain.
And you can turn that observation into active practice right away through a technique called shadowing. What makes shadowing so much more effective for confidence than just, listening to a podcast?
Shadowing is when you speak along with a native speaker in real time. You're trying to match their rhythm, their intonation, their pitch as closely as you possibly can. It's a full body practice. And because your brain can't fully separate the muscle movements of practicing confident speech from actual confident speech, you are physically strengthening those neural circuits for fluent automatic delivery. You're kind of bypassing the whole grammar and translation part and focusing purely on the physical mechanics of sounding smooth and confident. You're training your delivery muscle.
Speaking of delivery, let's focus on something that so often gets ignored in language classes. Prosody. We tend to obsess over what we say, the words and the grammar. But the research is really clear that confidence is conveyed more by how we say it. The melody, the rhythm, the stress.
Absolutely. The research in phonetics is totally clear on this. Listeners perceive clear prosody and good rhythm as signs of confidence and credibility, even if the speaker is making some grammatical mistakes. The listener's brain is getting cues from your delivery just as much as from your words, and the opposite is also true. You could speak with perfect grammar, but if you deliver it in a flat, hesitant monotone, or if your voice always goes up at the end of a sentence.
Like you're always asking a question.
Right. The listener's unconscious takeaway is that you're uncertain or you lack conviction. And this is a huge deal because so many learners accidentally undermine their great grammar skills by not mastering the rhythm of confidence.
So for someone listening to this who wants to work on it, what are the steps? How do you train something that sounds so subtle?
It is subtle, but it's very trainable. First, you have to change what you listen for. Stop listening just for new vocabulary and start listening for delivery. Listen to how confident speakers pause, where they put stress on words to make a point, how their pitch goes up and down. Second, and this is the most important part, you have to record yourself. Listen back to your own speaking, but not for grammar mistakes. Audit your delivery. Are you speaking in a monotone? Are you stressing keywords? Are your pauses thoughtful? Or are they just filled with anxious ums and a bias? The case of Kenji, the engineer, really shows this. His technical presentations were grammatically perfect, but his feedback always said he sounded tentative or lacked authority. The analysis showed he was delivering these complex statements with a flat tone and that rising intonation at the end. So he started practicing varying his voice, consciously stressing his main points, and making sure his pitch went down at the end of a statement. The feedback on his very next presentation changed to authoritative and convincing. He didn't learn any new vocabulary, he just changed the sound of his confidence.
That is just stunning. to go from tentative to authoritative just by changing your pitch, it really confirms this powerful link between our physical body and our mental state, which leads us straight to embodied cognition and the research around power posing.
Embodied cognition is this idea that your body's posture and movements aren't just a reflection of how you feel. They can actually determine how you feel. Your posture is sending signals to your own brain, not just to the people you're talking to. And the well-known research, often linked to Amy Cuddy, showed that just making simple changes to your body posture can trigger immediate, measurable chemical changes in your brain. If you stand in an open, high-power pose, shoulders back, chin up, hands on your hips, taking up space for just 2 minutes, you get a measurable increase in testosterone, which is the hormone of confidence and risk-taking. And at the same time, you get a decrease in cortisol, the main stress hormone.
So if you go into a stressful English conversation, you're hunched over, making yourself small, you are literally telling your brain, be scared, be cautious, and your brain just ramps up the anxiety.
That's it, exactly. You're starting a feedback loop where your body reinforces the feeling of defeat. So the actionable strategy is to do the opposite. And it's so quick and effective, it should almost be mandatory for learners. Before any stressful speaking situation, a meeting, an interview, find 2 minutes, even in a bathroom stall, and consciously adopt a powerful open posture. The sources documented language classes that started with a 2-minute confidence posing exercise. At first, the students felt silly, but the results were undeniable. The students who did the posing showed a measurable increase in how loudly they spoke, how often they participated, and how willing they were to try using new, more difficult language. You are literally giving yourself a chemical boost of confidence through a simple 2-minute physical hack.
Okay, we've covered chemistry, psychology, and physical delivery. Now let's dive into the nuts and bolts of the language itself. How do we structure our practice to actually reduce the cognitive burden when we're speaking live?
The biggest enemy of fluency in the moment is cognitive overload. When you're trying to speak, you're juggling so much at once. Finding the right vocabulary, applying grammar rules, getting the pronunciation right, organizing your thoughts, managing the conversation. It's just too much for your working memory. George Miller's classic research showed our working memory can only hold about 7 distinct items at once. If every single word and every grammar rule is a separate item, you hit overload almost instantly. And that's what causes that slow, halting, effortful speech.
So the solution is the chunking strategy. If you can group those 7 items into one single piece of information, you free up all that brain power to focus on your message.
Precisely. Confident speakers do this all the time, whether they realize it or not. They rely on chunks. These are prefabricated phrases, collocations, fixed expressions. Instead of your brain scrambling to find 7 separate words and rules to ask a question, it just retrieves one prepackaged unit. So for instance, instead of building the sentence, would you mind if I asked a question from scratch, the confident speaker's brain just pulls out the whole chunk. Would you mind if I asked a question? That reduces the cognitive load from 7 or 8 items down to 1. And all that mental energy you just saved can be used to listen to the other person, organize your next thought, or just stay calm.
So the practical application for you, the listener, is to really change how you study. Stop just memorizing single words. Start learning and practicing common phrases as complete, ready-to-use units.
Yes, absolutely. Build a mental library of conversational chunks. Memorize story starters like, that reminds me of a time when, or professional phrases like, I was wondering if you could elaborate on. You practice these until they're completely automatic. They act like a mental scaffolding that your brain can rely on, which is the definition of reducing the cognitive load and building confidence. Look at Marcus, the businessman from Germany. He struggled with sounding spontaneous during investor pitches, so his solution was to create a personalized library of chunked phrases for that specific context. Strong openings, transition phrases, ways to handle tough questions. By automating the delivery of those chunks, his mind was freed from the task of building sentences on the fly. He could focus completely on connecting with the investors and delivering his message persuasively. That's what high confidence looks like.
Reducing that cognitive load is huge. Now let's talk about another behavioral tool that seems completely backward at first. Strategic silence versus anxious rushing. The research shows that confident, authoritative speakers actually use more silence than anxious speakers.
It is a total reversal of what you'd think. Anxious speakers are terrified of silence. They think any pause makes them look incompetent, so they rush to fill every single gap with filler words or by just rambling. But that behavior just makes the anxiety worse and makes them harder to understand. Confident speakers, on the other hand, Use pauses deliberately. They reframe silence. It's not a sign of inadequacy, it's a tool for control and thoughtfulness. A pause can signal to your audience that you're thinking carefully, or it can be used to add emphasis to the point you just made.
So the way the audience perceives that pause is completely different.
Oh, dramatically different. Research confirms that audiences see these deliberate, short pauses as a sign of intellectual engagement and control. It actually increases their respect for what you're saying. When you learn to embrace silence, taking a visible breath before you answer a tough question or pausing for a beat between your main points, you're communicating control. Elena, the researcher, used to speak really fast because she was afraid of sounding incompetent. When she trained herself to use strategic pauses, a deliberate breath here, a short silence there, people not only understood her complex arguments better, but she started getting feedback calling her thoughtful and impactful. Her confidence just soared because her fear of silence was replaced by proof that silence actually communicated authority.
So if chunking and silence help with the quality of our speaking, the frequency hypothesis is all about the quantity and making it automatic. This core linguistic idea that the more you use a word or a structure, the easier it is to access, that applies to the behavior of confidence itself, right?
It's critical for building the habit. You have to contrast rare, high-pressure practice with consistent, low-stakes practice. If the only time you ever speak English is during a big, stressful presentation once a month, your brain learns a really damaging lesson. English equals stress. And that makes it harder to access those automatic pathways. Confidence is not built in a few heroic high-stakes moments. It's built through thousands of tiny, consistent, low-stakes micro-practices that teach your brain one simple thing. Speaking English is normal. It's manageable. It's just a part of daily life.
So you need to find ways to inject English into your daily routine to make it unremarkable. What are some of these micro-practices that a listener could start doing today?
Oh, simple, consistent things. Talk to yourself in English while you're making dinner, just narrating what you're doing. Voice your thoughts in English on your commute. Set your internal monologue to English for just 10 minutes a day. Even just voicing your opinions on social media posts in English, any activity that forces you to produce language in a low-stakes way strengthens those neural pathways. It recategorizes English from a performance language to a tool. Think of James, the manager. He used to dread his English-only meetings because that was the only time he ever spoke it. Maximum anxiety. So he started an English immersion breakfast. For 30 minutes every morning, he would just speak English out loud to himself, planning his day, talking about the news. This consistent low-stakes practice completely decoupled English from anxiety. By the time he got to the big meeting, his brain was already warmed up. English felt normal and daily, which dramatically reduced his stress.
Let's move on and tackle the biggest confidence killer of all. That debilitating fear of making mistakes. We need to reframe this using the idea of intelligent mistakes and the comprehensible output hypothesis.
The linguist Meryl Swain's research really highlights the importance of producing language, the output, not just passively consuming it. And she pointed out that the struggle to retrieve a word or a structure, what she called productive retrieval, that struggle is actually where the deepest learning happens. It forces your brain to work, and that work solidifies the pathway. Confident speakers understand this. They know that feeling of struggle when you're reaching for a complex word isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that your brain is actively building and strengthening a connection. They've learned to be comfortable with that productive struggle.
So we need to start categorizing our mistakes. Not all errors are created equal when it comes to building confidence.
Exactly. We have to separate intelligent mistakes from basic mistakes. An intelligent mistake is an error you make when you're trying to be more complex. You're reaching for an advanced phrase like notwithstanding the circumstances, and you get it slightly wrong. These mistakes are a sign of growth. They show courage. A basic mistake is an error in something simple that you've already mastered. Confident learners are willing, even eager to make intelligent mistakes because it means they're pushing their boundaries. The research talked about Roberto, a chef, who recorded himself speaking. He found that 80% of his errors were these intelligent mistakes. And when he saw that evidence, his self-perception shifted from, I'm bad at English, to, I'm a courageous learner who is testing my limits. The medical students in the sources even created a celebration protocol for when they finally retrieved a word after a visible struggle, which reframed the struggle itself as an achievement.
And our last tactical point is about optimizing your environment, specifically the feedback loop. The quality of the feedback you get can either skyrocket your confidence or completely destroy it.
Educational psychology tells us that for feedback to be effective, it needs to be three things: specific, actionable, and balanced. It has to start by acknowledging what you did well.
Vague criticism or constant correction while you're trying to speak just leads to cognitive overload and makes you hesitant to try again. So a huge takeaway for you as a listener is that you have to actively shape the feedback you receive. Don't just passively accept, correct my mistakes. When you're working with a tutor or a language partner, be specific. Say something like, this week I'm focusing on using more varied vocabulary. Can you just point out one moment where I could have used a better word and 3 moments where I did a good job? That directs their attention, makes it feel less threatening, and ensures the feedback is actually useful.
And the timing, just like with chunking, must be critical here. Getting corrected in the middle of a thought seems like a surefire way to overload your brain.
It is. When someone corrects you mid-sentence, your brain is trying to produce language and process analytical information at the same time. It just crashes the system and kills your confidence. The best approach is to separate the phases. Focus only on producing language during your practice time, and then set aside a separate, non-pressured time afterward to review the feedback. Aisha, a professional from Nigeria, experienced this. Her first tutors interrupted her constantly, and it made her retreat. She switched to a new tutor who let her finish her thoughts, always started feedback with a positive comment, and only offered 1 or 2 specific suggestions. Her growth was exponential. That structured, timed feedback loop protected her brain and let her confidence flourish.
Okay, we've managed the physical and behavioral inputs. Let's shift now to the mental tools we can use to really lock in these gains and manage our expectations for the long haul.
We can start with a technique from elite sports psychology: mental rehearsal, or visualization. This involves vividly imagining yourself performing a skill successfully. And what's so powerful is that visualization activates many of the same neural regions as actually doing the thing. So by mentally rehearsing a difficult English conversation, you're essentially giving your brain a risk-free preview of success. That familiarity makes the real event feel less threatening and really helps to dial down that initial amygdala response.
But what makes for effective visualization? It's not just daydreaming about being perfect, is it?
No, it has to be detailed, and critically, it must include failure management. You don't just imagine a flawless performance. You also visualize potential challenges, like maybe you forget a keyword, and then you calmly and vividly practice how you'd handle it. You imagine yourself pausing, describing the word using simpler language, staying calm, and then continuing confidently. So for 10 minutes before an important situation, you visualize this calm, successful performance, including how you handle the little bumps in the road. Yuki, the graduate student, did this before every seminar. She mentally rehearsed asking questions, answering unexpected ones, and managing her nervousness. By the time she actually stood up to speak, her brain felt like it had already done it successfully multiple times.
Next, let's touch on the power of personalization. The research is clear that we build confidence fastest when the content we're practicing is actually relevant to our real lives.
It has huge implications for your memory. Information that's connected to your own personal experiences is stored much deeper and retrieved much faster. If you consistently practice talking about your actual job, your hobbies, your passions, you're building these really strong, specialized neural pathways that will be there when you need them. Generic practice just builds weaker generic pathways. And the other benefit is that it shifts your focus. When you're talking about something you genuinely care about, your focus moves from linguistic performance, am I saying this right, to effective communication. Am I sharing this idea effectively? And that shift from monitoring yourself to delivering your message is the very essence of confidence.
You saw that with Fatima, didn't we?
We did. Fatima was struggling in generic conversation classes. The topics felt pointless to her. She switched to an online English book club that focused on literature she was passionate about. Suddenly, talking about these books she loved transformed the language from a chore into a tool for expressing her passion. And her confidence just soared because the language was finally serving a real, personal, motivating purpose.
We've talked about the external feedback loop, but let's turn inward to the most constant stream of feedback there is: the conversation with yourself, our self-talk.
Cognitive behavioral theory gives us the framework here. If your self-talk is negative and judgmental, I always sound so stupid, I'm going to mess this up, it creates chronic anxiety, and that anxiety leads to avoidance, which limits your practice. The crucial shift is to move from judgmental self-talk, which criticizes you as a person, to instructional self-talk, which directs your behavior.
So instead of thinking, "You're talking too fast again, you idiot," a confident speaker is using constructive self-talk.
Exactly. Instructional self-talk is what you see with elite athletes under pressure. Okay, slow down, enunciate the final consonants, or take a deep breath and state your 3 main points.
It's so much more functional than just criticizing yourself. The research recommends keeping a self-talk journal. You write down the negative thoughts, and then you consciously rewrite them into something that is accurate, compassionate, and focused on growth. So you might rewrite, "I'll never be fluent," into, "Today I communicated a complex idea effectively, and I am much better than I was 6 months ago." Sophia's story really highlighted this. Her conscious effort to revise her self-talk dramatically increased her confidence and how often she was willing to speak, even before her English ability had changed all that much. Her new internal story gave her the psychological permission to be confident.
And we can wrap all of this up with a final crucial perspective: playing the long game. We have to manage our expectations about how confidence is actually built.
Right. Learners often think confidence will just arrive one day, like you flip a switch once you pass a certain test. But confidence is cumulative. It's like climbing a mountain. It builds up through thousands of small, consistent acts of bravery. And what's really important is that studies show confidence often lags behind your actual ability. You might be objectively much better than you were 6 months ago, but because it happens so gradually, your feeling of confidence hasn't caught up yet. And this is why tracking your progress with a journal, with recordings, is so important. You need to show your brain the evidence of how far you've actually come.
That long game perspective also changes the very definition of what confidence is, doesn't it?
It completely does. Confidence doesn't mean you never make a mistake. It means you are comfortable with the process. And that process includes the inevitable plateaus and bad days. You're going to have days where the words just don't come. A truly confident learner sees those setbacks not as proof of failure, but just as temporary expected blips on a long upward journey. The story of Fan, a nurse who spent 3 years in what she called consistent, courageous practice, really shows this. She now speaks boldly and advocates for her patients at international conferences. Her apparent ease today isn't some innate gift. It is the direct result of thousands of small, strategic, science-backed efforts accumulated over time.
So we've completed our deep dive into the science of confident English speaking. And the core idea that we've uncovered is really clear. Confidence is a skill, and it's built by intentionally aligning all these interconnected systems: your neurology, your psychology, your social identity, and your behaviors. We've learned actionable techniques you can start using today: managing your amygdala with your breath, programming your RAS to see your sixth senses, getting a chemical advantage with power posing, using chunking to reduce cognitive load, and embracing intelligent mistakes to grow. Remember, your brain is plastic. You can build new, faster, more automated pathways at any age. The key is just consistent, strategic application of this science.
And we really want to encourage you to internalize this idea of English ownership. Stop trying to imitate some perfect accent from New York or London. You have to embrace the fact that English is a global language spoken by far more non-native speakers than native speakers. Your accent, your unique way of phrasing things, they aren't flaws to be hidden. They are part of your effective communication toolkit. The ultimate measure of confidence isn't perfection. It's effective, clear communication, achieved while fully owning your unique voice as a powerful, legitimate global speaker. So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought for your week. If you fully embrace the idea that confident English speaking is not a gift to wish for, but a skill to build, what small, strategic, low-stakes practice would you commit to doing every single day this week to reprogram your neural pathways and expand your comfort zone?
Think about that. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into transforming your English speaking experience. If you found these insights valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, Advanced English Listening Practice topic, name is How to Make Learning Fun. That title, How to Make Learning Fun, I mean, that's something that really hits home for everyone, right? Whether you're studying for a big exam or trying to get your head around some new software at work, or maybe you're just curious about a topic you saw online, we all hit that same wall. How do you turn learning from this chore into something that's actually engaging, joyful even, and something that your brain wants to do?
Yeah, it is the big question. And that's exactly what we're jumping into today. We're doing a deep dive into this. Because fun isn't just like a bonus. It's not just sprinkles on top.
Right.
The evidence is just overwhelming. Fun is actually a core requirement for effective learning. So our mission here is to sort of unpack the science and the art of making knowledge sticky.
Sticky, I like that.
Yeah. We're going to pull out some really practical, evidence-backed strategies from neuroscience, psychology, classroom techniques that anyone, any professional, any student can use right away to make any subject feel more like a discovery.
So it's not just about getting informed, it's about actually enjoying the journey to get there. The idea being that engagement is, I guess, the ultimate shortcut to remembering things long term.
It's the fastest path, it really is.
Okay, so let's start with the biology. Why does simply enjoying something, why does that matter so much to our brains? It sounds a little too simple, but the science behind it is pretty solid.
It's completely foundational. Yeah. And it all comes down to our brain chemistry. When we find something enjoyable or new or just engaging, it's not just a feeling. You are physically activating the brain's reward system.
The mesolimbic pathway.
That's the one. And this process releases very specific neurotransmitters that basically put a flag on the experience. They tell your brain, hey, this is important, store this away for later.
And anytime we talk about that reward system, the word dopamine comes up. What is its exact role in making information, sticky?
Right, so dopamine gets called the pleasure chemical, which is a bit of an oversimplification. It's much more accurate to call it the motivation signal.
Okay.
It's like a neurological spotlight. It shines on an experience and tells the brain, pay attention. This is worth remembering because it could lead to a good outcome.
So it's about prediction, not just the reward itself.
Yes, exactly. It's released most powerfully in anticipation of a reward.
Yeah.
That's what creates the loop that drives us to find the next clue or solve the next part of the puzzle. So if you can link a positive feeling to a piece of information, you are chemically cementing that memory pathway.
So if I'm trying to get through, say, a really dense technical document, and I break it down into tiny solvable chunks, and I get that little aha moment each time, that's dopamine at work.
That is absolutely what's happened. You're using that predictive reward loop to your advantage. And it's not just dopamine. Serotonin and endorphins are also in the mix.
How do they contribute?
Serotonin gives you that feeling of well-being, of satisfaction, and endorphins are kind of like natural stress relievers. So when you learn something in that positive emotional state, it becomes deeply ingrained because the whole experience was low stress and satisfying. It stops being a chore and starts feeling like a treasure hunt.
So beyond just making us feel good, how does this all translate into, measurable cognitive benefits, better performance?
You see a few immediate improvements. First, and most obviously, enhanced memory retention. Emotional experiences are just stickier. Think about it. Can you remember the ridiculously complex rules of a board game you loved as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. Effortlessly.
Right. Those rules are burned into your memory because they were tied to fun, to positive emotions, to repetition that you enjoyed. Those neural pathways are so much stronger than the ones you create by just, rote memorization.
I can still recall cheat codes from video games I played 20 years ago, but I forget my password from last week. That says it all.
A perfect example. Second, having fun literally reduces stress. Traditional learning environments, with all the tests and pressure, they flood your system with cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Right. And cortisol has a really nasty habit of inhibiting the prefrontal cortex, which is your center for complex thought and logic. It also messes with the hippocampus, which is where memories are consolidated.
So when we're stressed, our brains are chemically working against us. We can't think clearly or form new memories properly.
That's it in a nutshell. Fun acts as a buffer. It lowers that anxiety, it lets the prefrontal cortex relax and do its job of integrating new information. A relaxed brain is a receptive brain. And finally, there's the long-term benefit for your mindset. When the process is enjoyable, you start to see challenges differently. Setbacks aren't failures anymore.
They're just part of the game.
They're opportunities to figure things out, to grow. And that resilience, that positive outlook, that's the absolute bedrock of a growth mindset, which is what you need for any kind of lifelong learning.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical. Gamification. This word is everywhere now. And it's not just, playing video games in class. It's about using the psychology of games to make dense subjects captivating. So what are the actual building blocks here? How do you do it right?
Gamification is really just applying game design elements to non-game situations. It taps into our natural human desires for, achievement, progress, even a little social status. The foundation is what people often call the PBLs, points, badges, and leaderboards.
PBLs.
They give you that immediate feedback, that feeling of moving forward.
Let's break those down. Points. How can a simple number change how we learn?
Points are the most immediate form of feedback you can get. They take a huge, intimidating task and break it down into tiny, winnable moments. You get points for something small, reading a chapter, answering a quick question, even just showing up consistently.
So it feeds that dopamine loop we were talking about.
Instantly. Imagine a corporate training module. Instead of just read this document, it's get 10 points for every section you summarize correctly. Suddenly, a long, boring task becomes a series of small, measurable victories. And then you have badges. These are a step up. They're more significant than points.
How so?
Points measure effort, but badges recognize mastery. They're a symbol that you've completed a stage, that you've acquired a specific skill.
Okay, so it's a confirmation of competence. Can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. Think about a course on coding. You might get a Python novice badge after finishing the first few exercises. Later, you could earn a data science master badge for completing a really complex project. The badge isn't about the daily grind. It's a visible public signal of your achievement. It feeds that need for competence. And the last of the three is leaderboards. These tap into our natural drive for, social comparison and competition.
But that can be a double-edged sword, right? Not everyone is motivated by competing against others.
That's a great point. And they work best when they're used carefully. It's not always about ranking people from first to last. A leaderboard can track a team's progress toward a collective goal, or even just show your own personal improvement over time.
So I could be competing against my own score from last week.
Exactly. That could be just as motivating. A sales team competing to see who finishes their training modules first can turn a mandatory task into a fun, collaborative challenge. It creates that sense of friendly competition and accountability.
So that's the PBLs, but it goes deeper than that.
Oh, much deeper. You have to structure the entire journey. You introduce quests and challenges. You frame the objectives with a story.
So instead of saying study photosynthesis, you say,
Your quest is to discover how plants create their own food. It adds a layer of purpose and intrigue. This leads right into levels in progression. You structure learning like, say, belt colors in martial arts. Each level confirms what you've learned and unlocks the next set of challenges. It makes a huge topic feel manageable.
because you're only focused on the next step, not the whole mountain.
Precisely. And maybe the most important psychological shift here is how we treat mistakes. In traditional learning, mistakes get punished.
Which makes people afraid to even try something new.
Right. It kills exploration. In a game, what happens when you fail? You just try again, maybe with a new strategy. Mistakes aren't failures, they're just data. They're opportunities to learn and adjust.
Yeah.
And that mindset is absolutely crucial for deep, lasting understanding.
You know, it's so true. Our brains are basically story processors. We make sense of the world through narratives. So the real challenge is, how do you take something dense and dry like data or regulations and wrap it in a story that makes it stick?
Storytelling is the ultimate engagement hack. It lights up the limbic system, our emotional center. As soon as you connect emotionally with something, your brain dedicates more resources to it. So the goal is to make these abstract concepts relatable.
And a great way to do that is with personal anecdotes.
Yes, they're the perfect bridge from the abstract to the real. A math teacher introducing probability could start with a story about winning, or more likely losing, the lottery. All of a sudden, a dry mathematical concept has a real-world emotional anchor.
It makes the stakes feel real. And for something like history, you can use historical narratives to go beyond just names and dates.
Definitely. Instead of just listing the causes of the American Revolution, tell the story from the perspective of a single foot soldier or a colonial woman running a farm. Turn it from a list of facts into a gripping human drama filled with impossible choices.
And for subjects that don't have historical figures, like, say, physics or economics, you just invent them. You use fictional scenarios.
Can you walk me through an example of that? How would you build a story to teach something technical?
Okay, let's say you need to teach economics. You could invent a story about an astronaut who gets stranded on a deserted island. Suddenly, this person has to deal with scarcity, production, consumption, maybe even trade if another person shows up. All the core principles of economics become urgent matters of survival in the story. So you're turning a textbook chapter into a little survival drama. That's brilliant. I can see that being really powerful for professional training, too, like business ethics.
That's a perfect application. Case studies in ethics shouldn't just be reports of what went wrong. They should be presented as unfolding human dramas. Who are the people involved? What pressures were they under? When was that exact moment that a decision tipped from ethical to unethical? That forces learners to debate the gray areas, which is so much more powerful than memorizing rules. You can even make it interactive. Use a choose-your-own-adventure model. Let the learner play the role of a CEO during a crisis. Their choices change the outcome of the simulation. It's an incredible way to teach cause and effect.
And behind all these techniques, the main goal is to create that emotional connection.
That's the glue that makes it all stick. When you feel the tension, the triumph, the struggle of the story, the information isn't just data anymore. It becomes part of your own experience. You remember how it felt, and that makes it almost impossible to forget. So if stories are how we grab the brain's attention, then direct, hands-on experience is how we really forge that deep understanding. I mean, it's the most primal way we learn. We have to move past just passively reading or listening.
Right.
We need to engage our senses, our motor skills. That kind of experiential learning creates these incredibly rich, multi-layered memories that just don't fade.
Okay, but a lot of our listeners are learning abstract things. Code, financial models, legal theory. What does hands-on even look like when you're not in a science lab mixing chemicals?
That is the key question. For abstract learning, hands-on means active creation and manipulation within a safe, controlled environment. The two big tools here are simulations and role-playing. So, for example, medical students practice procedures on high-tech mannequins. Business students can run a simulated company and see the real-time financial impact of their decisions. A history class could reenact a pivotal debate from the Constitutional Convention.
So your body and your mind are both actively involved, but in a totally risk-free space. What about actually building and creating things when the end product isn't physical?
It applies just as well. A computer science student shouldn't just read about code. They should be building a simple app from day one, even something simple, like a calculator. The act of building it forces them to apply the theory. Or a geometry student can use simple building blocks to physically feel the principles of load-bearing and structural integrity.
That brings us to project-based learning, or PBL. That seems to be the gold standard for this kind of thing.
It is, because it forces you to synthesize knowledge from a bunch of different areas. A classic example is designing a sustainable city. To do that project, you have to pull from urban planning, environmental science, sociology, economics.
You're not just learning isolated facts. You're forced to see how they all connect in the real world to solve a complex problem.
Exactly. And we really have to emphasize the kinesthetic advantage here. When you physically engage with the problem, when you build, manipulate, or role play, you are creating this powerful direct link between an abstract idea and its real-world application. It involves your body, what some call embodied cognition, and that makes the learning feel so much more concrete and, frankly, more productive.
It's clear that one size does not fit all. For anyone trying to master something quickly, that material has to feel personally relevant. So how does giving the learner a sense of agency, some control over their own journey, make learning more fun and more effective?
It's all about what we can call the autonomy advantage. As soon as learners get a real choice in what or how they're learning, their intrinsic motivation just skyrockets.
They take ownership.
Exactly. They shift from being passive recipients to active drivers of their own education. It stops being something that's forced on them and becomes a personal quest.
So in a practical sense, how do you build that choice into a curriculum or a training program?
It can start with something as simple as topic selection. The core skills might be mandatory, sure, but the application can be flexible. Let a writing student choose what they write their essay about, as long as it demonstrates the skills you're teaching. Let a biology student pick which animal or ecosystem they want to research for their big project.
That little bit of choice connects it directly to their interests.
Immediately. Another huge area is learning modalities. We have to accept that people learn in different ways. For any given topic, you should offer a kind of buffet of options.
Like what?
Well, you'd have the main reading material, of course, but also offer a series of short video explainers, an interactive simulation, maybe an audio summary they can listen to. The learner gets to pick the path that works best for them, which just reduces the friction.
That's so important in corporate training now. Some people need that live, structured webinar, but others learn better with self-paced modules they can do on their own time.
That's right. Giving people control over their own time and method is a massive motivator, and this should extend all the way to how they're set.
To the test itself?
Yeah. Why does it always have to be a written exam? If someone is a brilliant visual communicator, let them demonstrate their knowledge by creating an infographic or a presentation. The goal is to prove they understand the material, not to test how well they perform under exam pressure.
And the final piece is connecting it all to their existing life and goals.
That's the ultimate form of personalization. You have to explicitly show them the bridge. Link geometry concepts to the architecture of buildings they love. Connect financial market theory directly to how they can save for retirement. When the new information plugs directly into something they already care about, the engagement is automatic.
Learning in a silo can be so tough. It feels like a real grind. But when you share the experience, it suddenly becomes this dynamic, exciting thing. So how do we tap into that natural human desire to connect and collaborate?
Social learning is incredibly powerful. One of the most effective techniques is what we call mutual teaching. When you have to explain a concept to someone else, your own understanding of it deepens exponentially.
Because you have to move from just recognizing the information to actually organizing it and articulating it clearly. It's a huge cognitive jump.
It is. It immediately exposes any weak spots in your own knowledge. You see this in the workplace all the time when a senior employee mentors a new hire. The act of teaching the basics actually reinforces and clarifies the mentor's own expertise.
So beyond one-on-one teaching, how can we structure group work to be both fun and effective?
The structure is everything. You need activities with clear goals. Things like structured discussions and debates are great. A business class could hold a mock board meeting to debate a merger, with students assigned to represent different stakeholder interests.
That forces them to really dig in and defend a position.
Right, and then you can take it a step further with collaborative problem solving. Think of things like educational escape rooms or hackathons. These are intense, time-limited challenges where a team has to pool all their different skills to solve a complex problem.
That pressure and the reliance on your teammates must create a really strong bond.
It really does. The shared struggle and the shared victory are incredibly memorable. And this all points to the idea of social scaffolding. Learning with other people provides this amazing support structure. Your peers can explain things in a different way, offer encouragement, and just make the whole journey feel less intimidating. It turns a solo climb up a mountain into an enjoyable team expedition.
This feels like it might be the ultimate cheat code for making learning fun. Just connecting what you have to learn with something you already love to do.
It really is an engagement multiplier. When learning lines up with a real passion, the motivation just takes care of itself. It stops feeling like work and starts feeling like, like play. And you can find these connections everywhere.
Okay, give me some examples. Let's say someone loves video games.
A huge gamer is already primed to learn about all sorts of things. They can dive into the physics engine of their favorite game to understand projectile motion. They could study the in-game economy to learn about supply and demand and even game theory.
And what about someone who loves to cook?
Cooking is a science lab in your kitchen. A passionate cook is already experimenting with chemistry, whether they know it or not. They're learning about emulsions when they make a sauce, or how proteins denature when they cook meat. They're learning botany when they research where their ingredients come from. It's all there.
We can also pull from pop culture and media, which is, a shared language for so many people.
Absolutely. It's such an easy entry point. Instead of reading a dry academic paper, a class could analyze the historical accuracy of a popular movie, or use a viral meme to have a discussion about rhetoric and persuasion. The context is already familiar and engaging. And then there's the whole DIY and maker movement. That's a huge opportunity. Someone who loves tinkering can learn to code by building a little app that solves a personal problem for them. They learn electronics by building a custom gadget. The motivation is baked in because the end result is something they actually can use.
So the goal here is to intentionally blur that line between school or work and just life.
That's the whole point. We're trying to show that learning is everywhere, and the skills you gain while pursuing a passion are often the ones that stick with you the longest and in the deepest way. It's all about finding that personal meaning.
Okay, we've talked strategy, we've talked passion, but what about our actual physical state? Learning isn't just happening in our heads. Our bodies and our environment play a huge role.
That's right. This gets into the idea of embodied cognition, the theory that our physical state deeply influences our thinking. Let's start with the body itself. Movement is absolutely critical.
Right, sitting still for hours on end is just brutal for focus.
It is. We need to take regular physical breaks. The research is pretty clear on this. A 5 or 10-minute break to stretch or walk around every 45 minutes or so can do wonders for re-energizing your brain.
That 45-minute window seems to be the sweet spot for our attention spans.
It is. A short break helps your brain consolidate what you've just learned, moving it from short-term to long-term memory. We should also think about active learning postures. Don't just sit there rigidly. Stand up while you read. Pace around while you're trying to memorize something. Get up and draw the concept out on a whiteboard. And a great combination is walking and listening. If you can, listen to an audiobook or a lecture podcast while you're taking a walk. You're pairing a physical activity with a mental one, and it can make the learning feel much less like a chore.
Okay, so that's the body. What about the environment around us? How do we create a learning space that feels good and reduces stress?
Psychological safety is number one. You have to reduce the fear of judgment. The learning space, whether it's a classroom or just your own office, needs to feel like a place where it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes should be encouraged as part of the process.
People need to feel safe enough to ask the stupid questions.
The ones that are never actually stupid.
Yeah.
And that safety needs to be backed up with positive reinforcement. But not just generic praise like good job. It needs to be specific. Say something like, I really like how you broke that complex problem down into smaller steps. That reinforces the process, not just the outcome.
And what about the physical space itself? Lighting, comfort. Does that stuff really matter?
It matters a lot for sustained focus. Good lighting, especially natural light, reduces eye strain and can improve your mood. A comfortable chair is important, obviously, but so is personalization. When you can arrange your space in a way that feels like yours, that feels inspiring, you create a sense of ownership. That makes you want to spend time there doing the deep work.
Technology has to be the ultimate tool for making learning interactive and fun. It allows us to experiment on a huge scale with zero risk. So how do we really harness it for engagement?
Technology is all about creating what we can call digital engagement loops. It makes abstract ideas tangible. The most exciting examples are in immersive tools like VR and AR. For instance, instead of just reading about ancient Rome, you can put on a headset and literally walk through the Colosseum. Medical students can perform virtual surgery. Augmented reality lets you project a 3D model of a dinosaur skeleton right onto your living room floor.
It makes the theoretical feel completely real and exciting. What about the more common everyday tech?
That's where interactive apps come in. They are masters of gamification. Think of language apps, coding platforms. They all use points, streaks, and instant feedback to keep you hooked and working in that sweet spot of optimal challenge. They turn what could be boring repetition into a fun, competitive game. And behind the scenes, you have personalized algorithms. AI-powered learning systems can actually adapt the content and the pace to your specific needs in real time. If you're struggling with a concept, it will give you more practice. If you've mastered something, it moves on. That level of tailoring makes the whole process feel incredibly efficient and productive.
So tech is great for the moment-to-moment learning. But how do we maintain that fun and momentum over the long haul when a goal might take months or even years to achieve?
That requires a very deliberate approach to goal setting for sustained fun. It's about creating a momentum effect. The best way to start is with SMART goals. That's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
So not just, I want to learn Python.
No, that's too vague. A SMART goal would be, I will complete the introductory Python course and build a simple calculator app by the end of the month. It's concrete. Then you have to break down and visualize that goal. A huge project is intimidating. So you break it into tiny, manageable pieces, daily tasks, weekly milestones, and you use visual trackers like a progress bar or a simple checklist. Every time you check something off, you get that little hit of dopamine that keeps you going.
And you have to celebrate those small wins.
You absolutely have to. Implement a personal reward system. When you hit a milestone, treat yourself to something small but meaningful. A fancy coffee, an hour to play a video game, whatever works for you. Those little rewards reinforce the positive feelings associated with the hard work and keep the entire process from feeling like a grind.
We have covered so much, from brain chemistry all the way to virtual reality. When you distill it all down, what does it mean for the person just trying to learn something new? It seems like it's less about any single trick and more about a whole mindset shift.
That is the perfect way to put it. It's a transformative perspective. The biggest hurdle for most people is the belief that some subjects are just boring.
Right, I'm just not a math person.
Exactly. But the shift is realizing that no subject is inherently boring. It's usually the approach that's boring, or the presentation, or the fact that it doesn't feel relevant to you. So the first step is to actively look for the hidden story. You have to reframe it. Accounting isn't just about spreadsheets, it's detective work. Grammar isn't just a bunch of rules, it's a secret code for powerful communication. Every subject has a drama to it if you look for it.
And what about the stuff that really is just rote memorization? There's always some of that.
For that, you have to gamify repetition. Turn it into a game. Use flashcard apps that have competitive modes. Create the most ridiculous, absurd mnemonic devices you can think of. The novelty and the humor will make it stick. And if you just can't find the hidden story, then you have to force the connection. You have to build the bridge yourself. If you're a sports fan, connect those boring statistics you have to learn to analyzing player performance data. If you love novels, connect your corporate training on organizational behavior to the power dynamics in your favorite book.
So what's the learner's final responsibility in all of this?
The learner has to give themselves permission to play, to approach new things with a sense of wonder, like a child does. You have to be willing to experiment, to try different methods, and most importantly, to see mistakes not as failures, but as crucial data points on the path to understanding. It's that commitment to finding the joy in the process that truly separates someone who just learns from a lifelong master.
That's a really powerful framework for lifelong discovery.
It is. The most successful people I know don't just put up with learning, they actively seek it out. They see every new skill as an adventure and every tough problem as a puzzle that was made just for them to solve.
This has been such a great deep dive into the science of making learning enjoyable. To just quickly recap the big takeaways, we learned that fun is basically a neurochemical requirement for memory. The best strategies to create it involve gamification, telling powerful stories, learning with your hands, and giving yourself choice and working with others. The end goal is really to build a mindset where your curiosity is your guide and engagement is your fuel. It's about turning any learning task into a genuine pursuit of discovery.
And we want to leave you with a challenge. Think about one thing in your life right now, a task at work, a personal goal that feels like a chore. Just one thing. How could you gamify it, or find a story in it, or connect it to a hobby you love? How can you start turning your next challenge into your next favorite game starting this week?
If you enjoyed this advanced English listening practice and found these insights useful, please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more deep dives into fascinating topics. Continue exploring the joy of discovery.